Welcome everyone back to the Growing Money with Sean Trace podcast. I've got an awesome guest with me. Now, would you like to tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do?
Yeah. My name's Jesse Ernst. My wife and I own two businesses. We started a crepe shop, Claire's Creperie, in fall of 2019. So we just celebrated 5 years of being open, which is quite an accomplishment, especially navigating COVID crisis and all that stuff, and starting in the food industry for the first time 4 months before global shutdown. And then a few months later, I launched Ernst Financial Solutions, which is a personal finance business and career coaching firm, where I work with people on habits, behaviors, mindsets around money, and we work towards a desired future rather than just settling for landing at whatever our default future is.
I love that. This is a topic that came up recently, and it's something that has been. I like it when I get trends on the show, and it will be like I'll be talking to a couple guests, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is the budgeting group," and it's like all of a sudden all these people will talk about budgeting. But what's been coming up lately is kind of like intentionality, the idea of steering your ship instead of letting your ship just go where you want. I mean, it's kind of like this, right? Imagine you set out on a lake in a sailboat. Mm-hmm. And, first of all, sailing is never easy, but if you have a destination in mind and you aim the boat in a direction, it sure is a lot better than just saying, well, we're going to end up where we end up, because the latter definitely is dangerous in ways, because you could be adrift for weeks, months, years in the middle of that lake just spinning if you don't have a direction that you want to go.
Yeah, if you set out to aim, and I think it was Zig Ziglar who originally said it, or at least he gets credit for it. If you aim at nothing, you hit it every time.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't know where you're going, you'll end up somewhere else. I can't remember who said that one, not original to me. But if we don't know where we're going, how do we know when we arrive?
Yeah.
Right? There's a few places that I know how to get to, no GPS, that are, further away from my hometown, right? If I leave here, I'm just outside the Orlando area, and go up to my parents' house and just southeast of Atlanta, I can get from my house to their house, no problem whatsoever. But if I'm going somewhere else in Atlanta, I'm probably going to put it in my GPS, because I don't want to just get to a big, massive city and be wandering around there and be like, well, I'm in the right city. But if I'm going to a specific restaurant or a specific friend's house or a specific destination that, oh man, I really want to go here and have this or experience this, I don't want to wander around. I want to be very intentional about plugging in that address and getting to that specific destination.
I love that. It's like there's a couple things too. I remember, I'm gonna date myself here. I'm pretty much pre-internet. There were days where we didn't have mobile, and I remember like the early internet stuff. You had MapQuest or Google Maps and stuff, and you'd sit there and you'd print it up. And it was a checklist. And, it wasn't like the beautiful GPS that's like, get off here, turn right at the light,
Right. You can change the voice to be British or whatever.
Right. Right. Hello. Hello. Oh, yeah, that's great. I always do have really fun voices for everything I do. The most fun voice, though, is when I have yoga. I changed it up to like this Australian lady. Now inhale. It's like crikey. It's like Steve.
Right.
Oh man, I wish I could get Steve Irwin voices for yoga. That would be great.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
That'd be insane.
Much more fun with Steve Irwin's voice.
Now take your head and put it behind your head and just relax.
Right. There we go, man. That would be awesome right there. Oh, that would make it much more enjoyable. But you would have these, and I also have been studying. I love project management. And, you get these milestones, and then you have the tasks that you have to do in the process. And if I say to my daughter, okay, we are going to help you create an emergency fund, even though she's a kid, I want to help you create an emergency fund. And you get your allowance every week, and we're going to start saving that up. And she's like, okay. But if I just say, all right, we're saving up $1,000, she's going to be like, that's so much money. How do I
Right.
do that, Daddy? But it's like, oh, well, hang on. We're going to save that up, and it's going to be this much every week. Oh, I can do that.
Yeah.
And one of the things, too, like if you don't have a clear goal, charting the course and breaking it down into sub goals is impossible. And that in life, everything is accomplished with little mini tasks and little mini goals along the way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's one small step at a time. So my wife and I have been on the Dave Ramsey train for 13 years now. Right. And he specifically calls the steps in his process baby steps. And there's
Yep.
an intentionality behind that because anybody can take a baby step.
Yeah.
And there's small steps that lead to a giant goal of financial freedom, right? Financial and time freedom. And the very first one, you already said it, is $1,000 emergency fund. Well, for your daughter, oh my gosh, that's insurmountable. That's going to take years to do. For most adults, with discipline and the focus, right? The focus on this is the goal. It's not $10,000. It's not $100,000. It's $1,000 as fast as you can. What's laying around my house that I can sell and get rid of? Where can I pick up overtime or drive DoorDash or Uber Eats or, whatever it is, side hustle it? How quickly can I get $1,000? It's a baby step. It's a small step and moving in the right direction, but it's moving in the right direction. And that's step one. It's not the entire, got my $1,000. Okay, I'm good. I'm good for retirement.
Yeah.
So
Right.
small steps create giant accomplishments.
100%. You just said something too. We had a pre-interview, and we were talking a little bit, and there was one thing that you said and I said that we kind of clicked on, and I was like, I need to talk to you about that. And you just mentioned it right there, and that was financial freedom and the idea of truly being free. And this is something that some people don't understand the idea of freedom. And my guest the other day was talking about how when you have extra debt, when you are saddled in a job that doesn't give you time off, that doesn't allow you to take days if you need days, you are not free. You are, locked into some type of servitude that is not fun. And it's not fun to be able to not afford a day off. And this is something that's motivating me because right now I have a job that is hard for me to take days off. It's hard for me to say with my wife, she's traveling for work and said, oh, I'd love for you and our daughter to come. And I reached out to my work and I said, hey, I need this day off. And they're like, yeah, everyone else is taking that day off, so you're really not allowed to. And I was like, it's a month and a half away. And my job still would be like, sorry, buddy. And that was just when we had this conversation, I had asked for this day off a couple days before, and I was just like, wow, okay, Jesse's speaking my language. Yeah. Talk to me about financial freedom if you can.
Yeah, I think that freedom and success are defined slightly differently by every person, right? For one person, success is a C-suite executive, but maybe they work 90 hours a week, but they love it, right?
Yeah.
And for somebody else, it's more time with family, more time traveling, more time to be present at milestones in their kids' lives, or just spend time with our lovely wife, right?
Yeah, right.
But time freedom and financial freedom are not mutually exclusive. They're conjoined twins in my mind. Because if I have time freedom with no financial freedom, I'm pretty limited on what I can do with all that time. If I have financial freedom and tons of money but no time freedom, I'm pretty limited on what I can do with those assets. Right? So finding the balance between the two is vital to your individual success. For me, so my wife and I, we're the weirdos. We drink the Dave Ramsey Kool-Aid and ascribe to that whole system of no credit cards and don't care what my credit score is. I don't even know if my credit score exists anymore. And no debt. Worked 2 jobs during college, 2 and 3 jobs in the summers. Cash flowed our college degrees. Got married, paid cash for our furniture, cash flowed her senior year. We got married right before her senior year of college, and drove clunkers, right?
Yeah.
Old cars. It's what we could afford, right? That broke college student first married. Like, we joke about it, but then within a few years, right now, the average thing to do is to go get car payments and then become enslaved to a job, because, well, if I don't have a
Yeah.
job, then my car gets repossessed and I get foreclosed on, and all this bad stuff happens. Well, that bad stuff only happens if there's debt attached to it.
Yeah.
So some of financial freedom is with no debt. I don't owe anybody anything, so I don't have to make as much money because I don't have as many bills. I've never had a car payment in my life, so I've never been worried about somebody showing up with a tow truck and hauling my vehicle away because I missed a
Yep.
payment.
Yep.
We paid our house off in just over 7 years, 7 years and 1 month and 27 days, actually.
That's awesome.
But we paid it off on my wife's 33rd birthday. At 33 and 34, we had a paid for house. And people will say, "Well, man, but you could have done this. You could have invested that. You could have done this." Yeah, but now I run my own business. We run our own businesses. We work for ourselves. I work 4 days a week in my
That's
coaching
awesome.
practice. I get to say no to the clients that I don't want or that don't fit within the values of my business and my time and my freedom. And I say yes to really fun clients, and I enjoy getting up and going to work. I enjoy what
awesome.
I get to do. I enjoy coaching people. I enjoy hearing people's stories, but I also enjoy time off with my wife and my daughter. I enjoy hitting the off button on my computer, close the laptop, walk out of the room. I'm done for the day. No one's calling me back into the office unless I call myself, because I'm the boss, I'm the salesman, I'm the CEO, I'm the CFO, I have all the
Yeah.
things. So there's that pressure to a certain extent. But the freedom that we experience is I can look at a month in advance. My parents said, "Hey, we're thinking about coming to visit." I went on my calendar and I deleted that day from my availability, so no one can schedule an appointment on that day.
That's awesome.
It's mine to have. But I have the freedom of that because I don't have the debt. And I'm not casting shade on anybody who has debt. But if you stop and you think and ask yourself this question: if I didn't have any payments in the world, what could I do?
Ah,
And I challenge the listeners to take 10 or 15 minutes of just quietness, or if you're married, take 10 or 15 minutes with your spouse and say, if we didn't have any payments, like debt payments, like if you're renting or you have your mortgage, I'm saying outside the mortgage, no car payments, no credit card payments, no student loan payments, no back taxes, none of that. What could you do with your money? If your boss is a jerk, I can go somewhere else and make less money, or I can go somewhere else and make more money. But I know and I feel that freedom to go explore those options because I'm not subject and enslaved by payment after payment after payment.
right. There was a experience that I was in graduate school, and I have student loan debt, and I wish I had have heard all of this before I took student loans. I wish I had have heard all of this before things went the wrong direction, and I remember one of my classmates in school was had financed a car. Not only was she doing student loans, she suddenly financed a car.
Yeah.
And there was a point where she started missing payments. And then she felt overwhelmed, didn't have a job at the same time. And there was a day where they repossessed her car. And she was really upset and really distraught and said, "They took my car. They took my car." And there was a point where one of our classmates said, "But you didn't pay for it. It wasn't your car. It was a loan, and you had made like 5 payments, and then you stopped paying." And it was a tough situation because, she needed the vehicle, but the reality is it was never her car. When she was borrowing that money, it was the bank's car. And when said money wasn't paid for, they took it back. And I'm not getting into the here's or there's of how she did it, and it was not done right. But if she had have got a clunker, And the amount of money that she paid in those early payments would have paid for a beat up old car outright. But it
Right.
was, she wanted the new, nicer car. And
Well, it's
it
the argument of
was,
reliability, right?
yeah,
My truck's 16 years old and has never left me stranded. So, by definition, it's reliable, right?
yeah. Right. And, you have that reliability too. It definitely wasn't like, let's say she had a 4 months with this new car and then it was gone. Well, if she had paid for an old car, probably would have lasted her longer than 4 months,
Right. Yep. Yeah.
Even if she had to put some extra money into patching it up to keep it going, it would have
Right.
been a better investment.
Well, 100% of repos happen when there's debt attached to it.
Yeah.
100% of foreclosures happen on houses with mortgages. Right. So the challenge, one of the challenges is keeping up with the Joneses. Right. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the phrase that we always use. But the Joneses are living payment to payment too.
Yeah.
They're keeping up with the
Yeah.
Smiths. And the Smiths are living payment to payment, keeping up with the Joneses. And the Joneses are keeping up with the Smiths. And everybody's trying to outdo each other instead of saying, you know what? No one cares about what you drive. I'm saving
Yeah.
up for a newer truck because I want a newer truck, not because it's going to impress anybody. And for
Yeah.
me, a newer truck means I buy a 3 or 4 year old one where somebody else has already taken the major hit on the majority of the depreciation. But that's for me.
Yeah.
And if no one sees my truck, I would still enjoy it, right? Rachel Cruz, who's Dave Ramsey's daughter, always says one of the ways to measure if you should make a purchase or not, if no one sees it, would you still want it?
Yeah.
And so it's measuring those motivations behind why am I making this decision? What is the benefit? And does the benefit outweigh the cost attached to it?
Yeah. I find that with one of the areas I always see this is with phones. Like everyone's got to have the newest phone, 25 Pro, Super Extra Max. And I finally upgraded my phone. And my daughter and I were sitting around and she's like, "What did you get, Daddy? Did you get something?" And I was like, "No, this is $150. It's the, bottom of the line." And she's like, "Well, why did you get that?" I was like, "I can make calls on it. It has all the features. It takes good photos and it does everything I need." Well, what? And I said, and I broke down and I looked at it and I was like, why should I spend all this extra when I don't need it? When I don't need it? It's like, certainly I could drive a Lamborghini, but why? Why?
Right.
When I see it, because where I live in Vietnam, it's a very congested place. The best vehicle for this place is a scooter because it's warm, it's what everyone has, and it's functional, and
Right.
it's just inexpensive. But when I see a guy who's trying to ride a Harley here, and it's just awkward and out of place and excessive, and I'm not hating on Harleys, great motorcycle, but is it needed for your situation? You know what I mean? And is it
Right.
the right fit for where you're at and your life and the location? I love that too. And I also love the 24-hour rule. I try to push it to 48. Do I really need this? And taking that time to really sit there and think about what you need. And because maybe you are a videographer and that, super expensive phone is your backup camera. Well, okay, then I get it. Then it's more justifiable. But, for most of us, we don't need that. You're not a videographer. You don't need the backup camera.
Yeah, what's the practicality of it? And to circle back around, like, does this add or detract from my freedom?
Yeah.
That's part of my litmus test. Mine and my wife's family values are faith, family, freedom, and impact. Everything has to go through that litmus test to see, is it worth my time, energy, and effort? Is it worth my assets? Is it pro or against my faith? Is it pro or against my family? Is it pro or against my freedom? And does it create impact or does it detract from it? Right? If it measures up to one or some of those, then it deserves a look. If it violates one or some of those, it's discarded. A iPhone 16 doesn't add to or detract from any of those, except my freedom, maybe. Right? If my iPhone 12 is still fully functional, I don't need or want the 16.
Yeah.
Right? And if that's what is part of somebody's values, to have the best and the shiniest, okay. Or if you have the additional means to say, well, I can throw money at this and it doesn't affect. I'm working with a client who has a great retirement that just set for life, plus investments that she'll probably never have to touch. And she was debating on buying the new iPhone. And I was like, it's a drop in the bucket for you.
Yeah.
Right. If it's a drop in the bucket for you, don't spend a ton of mental energy on it. If it's a big part of your world, then you've got to evaluate, is this worth the time, energy, and effort? Does it add or detract from my freedom?
I love that. The other thing too is that, and this is something that we were talking to our daughter about last night. Just because you want something doesn't mean you need to always go down that path. Like, we think freedom is this idea, an ability to do whatever you want. But sometimes freedom is also the freedom to set boundaries with yourself too. The freedom to make choices, because there was this idea yesterday. My daughter was like, well, I want to watch TV. And we told her to turn off because it was time to go to bed because she had school. And she said, well, that's what I want. I want this. And I was like, you know what I want? I want to have an infinite chocolate eclair party where I can eat as many chocolate eclairs as I want. You know what? But I said, you know what? But there's going to be a problem on the other side of that. I'm not going to feel so good because, you know how Daddy is with my food allergies. Chocolate eclair dinner party is not going to be the most fun thing for me the next day or even an hour afterwards.
Right.
And my daughter started laughing. And I think that, when you're tying in with Keeping Up with the Joneses and this idea of financial freedom, one of the things too is when we talk about the intentionality, when we talk about planning that, some of it and a lot of our freedom comes from not making the choices that are going to get us into problems in the future,
Right. It's the freedom of no.
Yes.
Or the freedom of not right now.
Yeah.
Delayed gratification is not denied gratification.
100%.
So saying not right now actually creates more freedom than saying yes to everything right now, right? Yes to, well, I want to buy a bunch of real estate. Well, if I have to do it with a bunch of mortgages, now I'm slave to those mortgages. If I say not right now, I'm going to save up and pay cash for it, or put 50% down, and now it's, instead of owing this mortgage, now it's this mortgage, and whatever the case may be. That actually creates more freedom.
Yeah.
And then if you save up the money and then you say, you know what, I don't want to be a landlord. Well, now you have the freedom to say no again and say yes to something different.
Mm-hmm.
I have the freedom to work 5 and 6 and 7 days a week if I want to, because I'm my boss. However, the consequence on the other side of that is lack of relationship with my wife, lack of relationship with my daughter, missing out on things that she'll be 2 next month. And there's a lot that happens in a matter of a week. Right? Sometimes at the end of the work week, which mine is 4 days, I come out and I'm like, when did she learn that? And she's like, she's been doing that all week. Well, I missed it.
Yeah.
Right? But I would miss so much more if I was working all the time. I have the freedom of saying yes and no to clients that I want or that I don't want. And it's not because they're bad people, but if it's not fun, like I have fun in my work. And because of some of the freedom of the decisions that we've made over the last 13 years, it is allowed and enabled freedom that we have now. So, interesting thing, we paid our house off this coming January. It'll be 2 years that we've had no mortgage. And
that's awesome.
We were at a family gathering, aunts, uncles, cousins, and whatnot. And I wasn't trying to brag. I was just saying, hey, I'm sharing this victory and this win. And people were like, well, it must be nice. I'm like, it is. You should try it.
Yeah. Right.
Do it. Lean into it. Well, what are you doing? What did you do? The same thing I've been saying for the last 13 years, but now that there's been the accomplishment, it's, oh, must be nice, must be making all that money, from family members that I know make more money than I do.
Yeah.
But we have the freedom of choice. And so we can choose to spend money on the newest phone and car payments and driving our money. Or we can choose to say, I'm purchasing freedom, and then I'm going to take that money and then I'm going to travel with it.
Yeah.
This summer, we took 2 weeks off and went to Paris for a week and London for a week. And man, we had a blast. It's freedom that we've created because of intentional steps. And it's not intentional steps that we took yesterday.
No.
We didn't become overnight successes. It was overnight 13 years in the making.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't the final payment. It was all the payments that led up to making that final payment on the mortgage. And that, to me, just because it's a reality in my life, it's one of my go-to examples. I have the freedom. I could go pay cash for another truck right now if I wanted to, but it would be sacrificing other things. And so my truck's fully functional. I don't have to, so I can intentionally wait, say not right now, until the right time and the cash is there for that specific purchase. And then I don't have buyer's remorse of, oh my goodness, I have a $900 a month truck payment, or I have, ridiculous amount of money payment, and I've got to do this and that and the other. I get to invest in my future. I get to invest in my daughter's future. I get to invest time with my family. And man, I mean, I could talk freedom all day long, but I don't want to monopolize the entire conversation.
No, that's a great. Well, let me spin it this way. What's one of your, someone wants to become, get this financial direction, this reorientation. What are some financial tips that you start telling people to really get ahead financially?
Yeah. First and foremost, we got to take a real legitimate look at where we're at, right? If we don't align everything of here's where I am, some people are in such a mess that they know that they're in a mess that they don't want to look at the mess.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, no, we have to dive into the mess to understand the mess, and we have to dive in and understand what the goals, the desired future is, and say, what's my wisest next step, and what's the process to get from point A to point B, and what does freedom look like? If I don't have a clarity and vision of what freedom looks like, then why would I be motivated to go through the pain and the trouble of looking at my mess, creating a plan to get out of the mess, working extra hours, side hustling, selling stuff that I don't use anymore? Why would I go through all that pain if I don't have clarity of a vision of the future? Mm-hmm. So it's got to start with, this is where I am. I recognize it. I acknowledge it. This is where I'm going. And the pain of change is less than the pain of the same. And so I'm willing to go through the pain of change.
Yeah.
If the pain of change feels greater than the pain of the same, then I'll just stay the same.
Yeah.
And so everything is pain and pleasure. Tony Robbins talks about that in his book, Awaken the Giant Within. Great book. Everything is pain and pleasure. But if one thing is more painful than another, then we'll go with the less pain. In the long haul, I'd rather have less pain and more pleasure. But it might mean that in the short term, I'm embracing more pain and less pleasure to create. What if I have 2 years of more pain than pleasure to create 20 years of more pleasure than pain?
So you buckle down, you tighten the belt, you get through that pain. It's easy to see when you are thinking about people that are, again, financial fitness, we look at it through a lens of like, well, that's bank stuff, But when you start talking about, well, maybe someone's out of shape and you want to get back in the gym, those first couple months in the gym are not going to feel great,
They're
but
not.
you have to jump on the scale. You got to look at, wow, this is where I'm at. I did not know. Wow, that's what I'm eating right now. Wow, I just didn't even think about that. But if you can't take a snapshot of where you're at There's no way to figure out how and where you want to get going. And this is where, though, I really, really, think and want to emphasize to anyone listening, find someone who can help you. Find a coach, find a mentor who's got their stuff together. Make sure you check that person out and know that they know what they're talking about. Because it's very hard to see where you're at and try to figure out how you can get to where you want to be going all on your own. It's not always easy, because maybe you can't even see where you're at very clearly. It's like that person floating in the middle of the lake in that boat without, direction. They might not know they're doing it wrong. And you need someone who can help you say, hey, you're not quite setting the sail correctly. Let me help you with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that as you bring that up, find somebody who's been there and done that. Find a coach, find a mentor, find most of the big movies that they have huge fan bases. Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. There's always a guide. There's always somebody who's there by their side, right? You've got Gandalf who's guiding Frodo and Sam. Sam's there with Frodo the whole time. It's not his weight to carry all by himself. Starts out with the entirety of the Fellowship of the Ring, right? And I won't nerd out too hard, but starts out with a group of people and accountability. Okay, Luke Skywalker has Yoda, and even when Yoda and Obi-Wan are gone, he still remembers the lessons learned from them, because they walked him through such crucial times to build the strength up to then defeat the final enemy. Right? Yep. So I know this is going to sound biased or salesy because I am a coach, but having a coach in your corner, whether it's me or somebody else, is vital to that success. Having somebody who's been there and done that, having somebody who says, hey, this is where that path is going. Somebody who's not emotionally attached.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time in our initial discovery session, they're like, why should I hire a coach? Well, I don't have any emotion attached to your money. So if you're doing something stupid with money, I'll tell you. You may not want to hear it, but you may need to hear it. And you're so close to the situation that you can't see the forest for the trees. An outside, unbiased, non-emotional perspective may be exactly what we need.
Yeah. 100%. It's so much more cool to think about having my own personal financial Gandalf or Yoda. I mean, that's rad.
Should I just get a wizard hat?
Right? Thou shalt not spend. It makes so much more sense, and it's more cool that way.
I like that.
Yeah. What would be a Yoda-ism for personal finance? I'll have to think about those. Oh, man, that's good.
I do constantly tell people, do or do not. There is no try. Right? I'm going to try to get out of debt. Are you going to try to get out of debt, or are you going to do it?
Oh, right? I love that. Let's talk about getting out of debt. A second level of figuring out where you're at. How can people start to get out of debt? What are some of the tools they can do to do that? Not try, do.
Right, exactly. So you mentioned before that a lot of people on your show come and talk about a budget, right? We have to have a plan. And writing the plan down makes it actually real. Not just, I got my budget up here. No, you don't. Or use the calendar method. You just know when your bills are due. It doesn't mean that you're intentionally saying, I'm spending every dollar on paper. When I first started budgeting, I was in commission sales. And that's the first group of people that will say, well, you can't budget when you're in commission sales. No, you do. You just budget off of a bad month, and then you allocate percentages to, if I make this much, I can meet all my bills. And if I make anything above it, I allocate percentages to where that's going to go. Paying off debt, adding to savings, putting in investments, all those kinds of things. But I would say that people in commission need a budget even more than everybody else who doesn't. But we all need to have a budget, written down plan that we look at, we're agreed on with our spouse, that we're moving in the right direction if we're married, and have somebody who's helping us hold us accountable to say, hey, this is in alignment with your goals and your desired outcomes. So having the plan, written it down, right? The GPS. That's plugging the address into the GPS. Every single month is different though. Right now it's December, Christmas. We had a budget for Christmas. Last month we had a budget for Thanksgiving. The previous month we had a budget for Halloween. We don't budget the same amount for Halloween as we do for Christmas.
Yeah.
right? In January, my wife, my daughter, my dad, and my sister-in-law all have birthdays. Okay, it's a little bit different than February where we have no birthdays in the family. Okay.
Yeah.
Every month has to be slightly different. So we have to have a written down plan. We have to agree upon it. We have to discuss it. We have to update it consistently. I make my clients look at it every single week, at least for the first several months of our coaching time together, so that we're creating new habits. We're creating new mindsets. We're embracing awareness of where every single dollar goes.
Yep.
Then we have to have a plan for our debt. Okay, my budget only meets my minimum debt payments. Okay, well, we're going to work on minimums, but we're also going to need to increase income because the minimum debt payments are going to take way too long to pay it off. And if we come to the student loan stuff, minimum payments on student loans don't have to pay it off.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. So federal student loans is actually the largest asset in the federal government's budget. And so they're not really incentivized to have you pay it off. They want you to continue to pay it. So they make the payments really, really low. And people are like, oh, it's manageable. I'll just have it until I die. That sucks.
Yeah.
Okay. So having the vision, knowing where I'm at, knowing where I'm going, then we start writing the plan, having a budget, and writing out all of our debts. Now, we teach to list them smallest to largest using the snowball method rather than the avalanche method. So just really quickly, avalanche method is highest interest rate to lowest interest rate, attacking the one that's killing me the most. Snowball is smallest balance to largest balance to get quick wins and free up capital. Okay. Now, the math works just a little bit differently in everybody's situation, but the behavior shifts more with the snowball than it does with the avalanche. Because sometimes the avalanche, we're starting with, let's say it's a $10,000 debt instead of a $1,000 debt. $1,000 is easier to pay off than $10,000. And then we free up that minimum payment to now throw at the next debt. So the idea with the snowball is smallest to largest. We know what the interest rate is, but we're not organizing it based on interest rate unless we have two debts that are similar. Okay, if one's $2,100, one's $2,200, but $2,200 has a 25% interest rate and $2,100 has a 12% interest rate, we can flip those because one's going to grow a whole lot faster. Yeah. But they're really, really close. It's not like, oh, this one's $5,000 and this one's $7,000. They're close. They're not. Smallest to largest to gain traction because we are all incentivized by quick wins.
Yes.
Why do all our video games have happy sounds to them? Why are there levels? So we can level up. I'm on this level. Okay, you're leveling up, paying off your debt. Go from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 to level 4 to level whatever, debt free. Okay. Meanwhile, we free up a payment and we roll it to the next one, making the snowball larger. Then we pay that one off, free it up, and roll it to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. This system has worked for hundreds of thousands of people, probably millions of people. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's worked for so many people that will tell you this method works. Okay. The avalanche method works, but it's behaviorally, and behavior is very, very important when we're talking about finance. Behaviorally, it's so much more challenging than the snowball because it takes longer to get those quick wins, right? We need quick wins. Yeah. Quick win, $1,000 emergency fund. Wow. Sometimes I'm working with clients, they've never had $1,000 sitting in their savings account ever. Yeah. And so $1,000 emergency fund is amazing. Why $1,000 before attacking debt? Because if a tire blows out or radiator goes, or I got to call the AC repairman because I live in Florida and we can't live without AC. If a small emergency happens, I'm not putting it on a credit card that I'm also trying to pay off and be like, oh, I'm defeated because now I added to this thing that I'm trying to eliminate. $1,000 emergency fund. So the first 3 baby steps in the process is $1,000 emergency fund, pay off all non-mortgage debt, so all consumer debt, and then we build up a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. Because then we actually have margin and some breathing room to start investing in all the other things that come afterwards.
I love that. One of the things that you pointed out that I wish more people talked about with debt and with getting in a better place financially, the idea of, you always see all these things online, cut costs, cut this, cut that, but sometimes we need to make more money. This is one of the things that I've been looking at. I was looking at getting ahead financially, and I've been living overseas, and one of the challenges is that the pay that I was getting for so long was just not sufficient. And and I was talking to my wife about this, and I was like, one of the reasons that I'm looking to move back stateside because I just don't have much career flexibility where I'm at overseas. And they're like, well, you can do this. or you can do this, or you can do this. And it's like, here's the growth room is non-existent.
Yeah.
And so, I found some different side hustles that allowed me to start increasing my earning potential. And now I'm looking at making moves again. And one of the things that this realization that I had was like, granted, I could try to get financially ahead on this, but this is not tenable long term. So you have to find ways to make more money. And, and one of the things that I love doing for myself, and I recommend other people do this, is start looking at what you have skills at. What is your skill set? What can you really, people look at you and go, you know what? I wish I could do that. Well, what is that thing? Can you teach it? Can you make an online course? Can you find someone who's willing to pay you for that knowledge?
Right.
My daughter last night was like, Grandma is such a good cook. She should have a YouTube channel. I said, why not? Why not teach people how to make food the way she makes food? And she's like, my daughter's like, that's a great idea. I said, yes, it is. And there are things that people, or why not open a little quick, food service, locally that she could do. If you can look at those things that you have that allow you to make more money, because maybe what you're doing is not your high value skill. Maybe you have a high value skill that you're not really putting any energy into because you're stuck in your 9 to 5. These are things that people have to look at.
Yeah. Yeah. Skills are assets.
Yes.
And yes, to pay debt off, there's only 2 things you can do: reduce expense and increase income.
Mm-hmm.
And it's up to you. And I'm gonna ruffle some feathers, right? But it's your debt.
Yeah.
It's your debt. I didn't sign up for your debt. You did. Okay. Personal responsibility. And personal responsibility then trickles down to decrease expenses and increase income. It's not, well, let me apply for forgiveness. Let me file bankruptcy. Let me do this. Bankruptcy is not the easy button that it's put out to be on commercials and all that kind of stuff. And I won't go down that rabbit hole. But it's your debt that you signed up for. And whether that was a good decision or a bad decision, that's the decision that we made. Okay, so we put on our big boy pants and we move forward.
100%.
But it's decrease expenses and increase income. All right, and when we decrease expenses, sometimes that means that we are letting go of conveniences. I worked with one client who was like, I don't have any money left over at the end of the month. I was like, you have $70 in subscriptions. How many music subscriptions do you need? How many TV subscriptions do you need? You need to be working so much that you don't have time to see more than one of these, where you watch one show at night before you go to bed if you want to, whatever. You don't need Hulu, Netflix, Peacock, Paramount Plus, HBO Max, all those things. You're paying for all of them. Pick a favorite. Yep. Well, this one has this show and this one has this show. Okay, but for the next 12 to 18 months or 24 months while you're getting out of debt, you don't watch that show. And then it'll be so much funnier when you see it 2 years from now and you've forgotten all about it and you can afford the subscription. If you're in debt, you can listen to commercials on Spotify until you're out of debt, and just don't buy what they're selling on the commercials.
Yeah, right.
Oh, 100%. But my commute is so long, and we can make excuses for whatever we want to make excuses for. Or we can make plans for what's really important to us. But one's going to lead to a default future, and one will lead to a desired future. And it's your choice. If you want to have 17 subscriptions that cost you $70, $80, $100 a month, okay. But that's money that could be purchasing your freedom from Visa and MasterCard and Sally Mae and anybody else that you want to mention.
Yeah, so true. And I think that, again, it comes back to that freedom to have some discomfort. Because, it's, and like what you were talking about, the pain now versus pain later, it is not always easy walking through the fire, but you're going to be sure as heck happy you did on the other side. Because maybe you have to temporarily walk through that fire, but on the other side is a beautiful beach and, a nice life versus having all that fun right now and then you blow it all. We were talking to my daughter about compounding interest, and I came up with this talk about talking about chicken. I'm actually writing a personal finance book for teens and tweens that's framed around the zombie apocalypse because we love zombie movies in my house. And all of the concepts, I mapped out the whole book and I love it. And as I'm writing it with my daughter, she's helping me with some of the fun stories. And the zombie apocalypse is such a fun way to look at all the things. But we were talking about compounding interest in chickens and an egg. So we said, okay, let's imagine that you're scrounging and you're going out searching for things for survival, and you find a chicken coop and there's 2 eggs. Now you're hungry. You could eat both those eggs and you haven't had a good meal in a long time, or you could eat 1 egg and then hold on to one. Okay. And she's like, okay, well, why would you hold on to an egg? And I said, well, because it's going to hatch a chicken. And without getting into all of the here's or there's, I'm trying to explain why we need a rooster as well. Let's imagine that it has a hen and it just magically starts producing eggs. And I was like, okay, so you get an egg and it becomes a chicken, and that chicken lays an egg. Now, suddenly, that chicken has, let's imagine that it lays 3 eggs. And she's like, well, yeah, should I eat all 3 now? And I was like, it's going to make more eggs. I said, well, how about we eat 1 egg and we let 2 of those eggs just sit, and then they become chickens. Wow, I've got 3 chickens now. Should I eat all the eggs now? Because now I have no problem money. I said, well, hang on. Now you've got a little bit more money. Let's eat 2 of those eggs, you know? And then we can let 8 of them hatch into more chickens. And she's like, wow, I've got, how many chickens do I have? I've got 11 chickens? Yep. She's like, now I can eat all the eggs I want. Well, not yet. Let's slow down. Now we can eat 3 eggs because you don't need 12 eggs, Let's eat 3 eggs. And then we're going to let the rest of the eggs become chickens. And suddenly she's like, and we sat down and we were looking on a piece of paper and double it, expanding outward. And after a year, she's like, now I've got like a chicken farm. And I said, exactly. Now, was it easy in the beginning to have that, that hunger? Oh no, it was not. I wanted to eat all the eggs. And I said, but what would have happened if you ate in the very beginning both of those eggs? She's like, I would have had no chickens and I would have been out starving and still looking for my next meal. And I said, it's the same thing with money.
Yeah.
If you can start fixing things and working on that basic self-control, you don't have to eat all the eggs right at the beginning. And she was just like,
phenomenal example.
Right? It's so great. It's like it is exactly the power of compounding interest. And also, and we're going to lean in on that and start writing the next one. Well, what happens if we flip that? You owe this person over here 5 eggs already. It's going to be even tougher in the beginning when they're coming and asking you for that 1 egg. And then the other egg, you have to save. So you are going to go hungry while you pay 1 egg and you wait for that chicken to have another egg. And that debt is going to be really painful in the beginning while you're starting to try to grow your chicken wealth and your egg wealth. But if you can, again, learn to be hungry a little bit, then it's going to be faster that you pay off the debt of eggs that you have. And then you can really start growing that wealth.
Right. Yeah. And again, I mentioned it earlier, delayed gratification is not denied gratification.
No.
It's saying not right now.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great analogy and so simple for a young girl to understand, but also have to sit there and think through. Like she's thinking through not just, ooh, well, I don't like eggs. Well, if you're hungry, you like eggs, right?
Yeah,
and
right.
The emotion that she had to process, because earlier I mentioned that finance is emotional. It's not just math.
Yeah.
Personal finance is like 5th grade math, right? 5th grade math is enough to balance the checkbook to know, hey, my income has to be greater than my expenses or else I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
5th graders understand that, but it's when the emotion comes in of comparison culture, comparing to other people, comparing, I want other people to see this, I want people to notice, I want this, I want attention. it's delaying the gratification and saying, you know what they think or about what I drive or what I do is irrelevant. The interesting thing is nobody cares what you're driving because they're so focused on what they're driving and what you think about what they're driving that it's just madness.
Yeah, 100%. You got to make choices. And sometimes those choices are not easy. Let me ask you one last question. If you could go back in time and give your younger self some financial advice, what would financial advice would you go back and give your younger self?
This is probably what almost everybody says, but invest earlier, right? Um, it well for me, it's either invest earlier or whether financially or invest in knowledge earlier.
I love
Like
that.
start learning earlier. My wife and I did start our first retirement accounts, Roth IRAs, in our, I want to say later mid 20s, late 25, 26, maybe 27, somewhere in there. When you look at the compounding interest, right, 5 years makes a
Yeah.
big difference, especially if it's on the front end. But I didn't know what I didn't know. So I couldn't have invested more money without knowing more knowledge. And so, but it's not all about knowing knowledge and never doing anything with it. It's applied knowledge, right? Applying principles, applying. And some people will hate on the Ramsey process, and some people love it. Okay, pick a process and stick to the
Yeah.
dang process. But if you're jumping around from this to that to this to that to this to that, get rich quick is there's a reason they're called schemes. They don't work. They make somebody else rich, right? Playing the credit card point game. Well, I can make these points and I can do this and I can do cash back. Listen, if I got to spend $100 to make one, that's a bad investment. I'm not in it for 1% gains. I'm in it for 10 and 12 and 15% gains. So
Yeah.
applying knowledge, getting knowledge, applying knowledge, and continuing to grow. And then using the power of compound interest. I can't remember who exactly it was, whether it was Einstein or Edison. They called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. And it really is. When you sit down and when you can explain it in eggs to, I believe your daughter's somewhere 10, 11?
Eight
Eight.
years old.
Okay, 8 years old. And an 8-year-old now has a basic understanding of compound interest. Okay, well then when you say, hey, you know what, you can spend $100 when she's a young teenager, you can spend $100, or you can save 10 or 20 of it for later, so it makes chickens and gets you more eggs. And every time you get $100, you put $10 in your investments. Well, now you've set your daughter up to be a multi-millionaire by creating
Yeah.
that habit, by creating the habit of delayed gratification, right? By saying, okay, I want this, but not right now, not at the cost of my future. So my
Yeah.
wife and I are still cash envelope people, have been for over a decade. There's probably been a few weeks or months here or there where we didn't, but we've realized that this helps us stay in line. And it's not because at this point we have a little bit more means and flexibility. However, we're intentional with our means and our flexibility. Travel is very, very important to us. And so we would rather put money into a travel account, into a high yield savings account, travel account, so that we can go on more trips, than be able to just go to the grocery store and get whatever and not pay attention to the bill.
Yeah.
So certain areas where we know that we tend to overspend, or it can be easy to overspend, restaurants, groceries, a few other things that we do, miscellaneous money, it's cash every single week. And when the cash is out, okay, well, let's make do with what's in the pantry until Friday. And
Yeah.
typically that's on Wednesday or Thursday at this point.
Yeah. Right.
But it's because habits and behaviors and mindsets. I don't want to eat my retirement or my vacations. So I would rather limit my restaurant money now so that I can go on a really great vacation in 2 months or 3 months or 6 months or later on this year. Right? Some people are like, well, I don't want to deny myself. Okay, but by not denying yourself now, you are denying yourself later. So in
Yep.
any way, shape, or form, we're making a choice whether to enjoy it and embrace it now, embrace the convenience of not having to cook at home and go out to eat all the time, or embrace the fun of, I've been to Europe a couple times now.
Yeah.
My daughter has been to, we got her a scratch map for Christmas last year, right before she turned 1. She's been to 13 states already and 2 countries outside of the US. And she'll be 2 next month. Right?
That's
To
awesome.
us, that's our version of freedom, and I'm not forcing that on anybody. But we make certain choices to enable that freedom. My whole desire in talking about my freedom is to plant seeds in people's minds and get people to slow down long enough to say, what is freedom to me? What does freedom to Sean mean? Once you have a clear definition or a clear direction of that, then you know what you're chasing. Then you know what sacrifices in the short term are worth it for the long-term successes, for the long-term gains, for the long-term freedom of, I can travel anywhere in the world. I'm going to retire a multimillionaire. I'll have the option to retire early if I want to. I'm going to walk around with no debt. I don't owe anybody anything. My boss is a jerk. Peace out. Where are you going? I don't owe anybody anything, so I don't have to make money here. I can go flip burgers and still put food on the table and keep a roof over my head. I can do something very, very simple and earn a lot less money. Now, it does give up some luxuries, but if the boss is a jerk, it's not where I'm going to live, or not where I'm going to work. But as long as I owe other people, I'm riddled with payments, I have to make a higher minimum than those who have no debt.